Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's AI Town Hall, part of the University of Washington's AI Task Force Speaker Series. I'm Kimberly Mishra, and I've spent over 2 decades at UW working in human resources at the intersection of strategy, communication, and innovation. More recently, I've been exploring how AI can enhance my own productivity, and I'm thrilled to be moderating this discussion on AI's impact on the future of work. This speaker series is designed to bring together AI industry experts and thought leaders to share insights that inform the UW community as we integrate new technologies into academic, medical, and business systems. Recognizing the profound impact of AI, this series includes diverse perspectives, both critical and supportive, to foster a well-rounded understanding of its benefits, risks, ethical, and regulatory considerations. Today, we are pleased to welcome Jared Spataro, who leads Microsoft's AI at Work efforts. He is a leading voice on the future of work, focusing on how AI influences leadership, career growth, and workplace productivity. In his role, he helps organizations understand AI's influence on business and workforce transformation. His team analyzes trends and develops insights to predict and shape what the future of work and business will look like across industries, while also delivering new products and features within Copilot, Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, and Power Platform. I've followed his insights through Microsoft's Work Lab podcast and his AI at Work blog. I appreciate the practical and accessible perspectives he brings to these conversations. He's also a parent and someone who has spent much of his career at a single organization, something we have in common. So he understands firsthand the long-term shifts happening in leadership, employee engagement, and organizational culture. Today, we'll explore how AI is reshaping work, its implications for higher education, and how we can ensure AI serves as a tool for human potential rather than a disruptor. Jared, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Thank you very much, Kimberly.
I have a few questions of my own for you, and then we have some great questions already coming in from our students, faculty, and staff.
Great.
We're also monitoring Town Hall at uw.edu, so please keep the questions coming, and we'll do our best to work them into the conversation. So our first questions are going to be around AI's impact on work and workforce transformation. You've said, and correct me if I've got it wrong, AI isn't just another productivity tool, it's a whole new way of working. What do you mean by that, and how should organizations be thinking about AI integration?
I could unpack that for a long time, but I'll try to be brief to get us started. There are two levels at which we see AI operating today in organizations. One is on the individual level, and the habits, the kind of workflows that an individual uses to just get their job done. And here, AI isn't just an incremental addition. In many ways, we like to think of it as something you can use to rewire the way you do things. But that's a lot harder than it looks, because most of us have kind of cultivated habits that work for us. We know how to manage email, or we know how to communicate with colleagues through meetings or chat. So on that level, you can't just take it and absorb it individually as kind of like an incremental tool, the way you might have with, for instance, during the pandemic, something like Zoom or Teams. That was very incremental. It's not like that. Then the second level is just a process level, where you look at these large, important kind of long-running processes that organizations use to get things done. At a university, it might be something like admissions, or even the design of curriculum. That's a process. There's kind of a series of steps that are followed. Again, it's not incremental. You have to start to think about, in those cases, gosh, AI can actually be used to essentially supplant what up to this point has been cognitive work that people do. But you don't do that incrementally. You actually do best when you take a step back and look at the inputs, the outputs, and what you need to do to get what you want. So on both those levels, it is an entirely new way to work. I still stand by that statement, that's for sure.
Great. I want to go straight into one of the themes that we've been hearing often on campus from people who are not super excited and who have a lot of fear. So many students and professionals are concerned that AI will replace their jobs before they even begin their career. Given that by the time today's incoming freshmen graduate, AI is expected to be ubiquitous, with jobs requiring significant experience in AI tools and productivity gains, how can we better communicate a balanced and realistic outlook that people keeps people engaged and motivated?
Yeah, first off, I'd say I'm very sympathetic to that perspective. I mean, when the world starts to move quickly, we all wonder what it means for us and for the people that we care about. And so that I totally get. I'll kind of look backwards for a moment to when I was back at university. I was there just as the internet was becoming commercialized. I remember very clearly being a sophomore at college when I got my first email address. Wow, look
Where'd
at
you go?
I went to Brigham Young University and I studied computer science. So I remember very clearly, as the internet started to wash over, not just the university, but my field of study. And it was a little bit disconcerting, but I feel like I learned something there that has really helped me, which was to lean into a secular trend rather than lean away from a secular trend. And as we look back to that time, my team has done quite a bit of work here. We see, for instance, there was a lot of fear about the internet displacing retail jobs or kind of the way the retail sector worked. It turns out when we go back and study what happened, that the internet created 7 times more retail jobs than it destroyed. It did destroy some retail jobs. There's no doubt about it. But those jobs were different. Those jobs look like SEO and SEM experts. They look like customer flow experts. They look like e-commerce experts. And that taught me a lot because I realized, yes, there is some creative destruction that happens when there's a disruption. But if you will lean into that, into what's happening with the secular trend and try and figure out where it's all going, you can ride the wave. You can actually, come out better on the other side than feeling like you were disadvantaged by what was happening. But again, I'm very sympathetic. So I know that, it generates fear when things move really quickly.
It does. It does. I'm not familiar with a term that you're using, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask you,
Sure.
secular trend, can you define that for us?
Yeah, you bet. In the tech industry, we're often looking for large kind of we'd call them trends that seem to gain momentum on their own and over time reshape big parts of the economy. So for us, a secular trend would include something like the PC and how it changed, how it digitized things, or the internet and how it kind of revolutionized the way we communicate, the way we shop. It also includes things like mobile, where all of a sudden, over the course of a couple of years, we had, these incredible phones as a platform. So we refer to that in the tech industry as a secular trend that gains momentum and becomes so big that no single company is driving it, no single person is behind it. It is kind of in a sector, if you will, of the economy and grows just by force of its own momentum. It really seems to get some sort of momentum that no one controls. So you can't stop it. For Microsoft, if I speak on behalf of the company, we totally missed the secular trend of mobile. We couldn't get on that wave to save our lives. We were just too late. And so we try to identify those trends early on and figure out where they're going and what can you do about them.
At UW sometimes, or at least within UWHR, we say that the toothpaste is out of the tube.
Yeah, great way to say it. Exactly. And maybe in this case, it would be toothpaste out of the tube and growing like a snowball. Like it
Right.
not only comes out, but it gets bigger and bigger over time.
Microsoft's Work Trend Index suggests that knowledge workers spend more than half their time on work about work.
Yeah.
How does AI help shift that balance and create a more meaningful productivity?
Yeah, let me give a little framing on this because it's a stat. You're exactly right, more than half their time. And it in the last time we measured, it got close to about 60% of people's time was spent on what we call kind of the coordination required to get work done. So we measured this by looking at people in our telemetry that were on Teams meetings, in chats, or working in email. So kind of essentially collaboration and communication medium. I guess I would stop by saying, boy, that's an amazing number. If you're a boss, let's put ourselves into a boss's shoes. That means that every employee you hire is kind of giving you essentially, if we round up to 60, 40 cents on the dollar for the labor that you're spending. And many of us feel that way. They're almost as a discount factor for each new employee that you bring on. And that has been a bit of a mystery for people when it comes to productivity of the whole, of the entirety of an organization. So AI has the potential to cut through that for us in a number of different ways. And here I'll just get very specific for a moment about examples that we see. We see, as an example, AI helping you to manage an inbox. So I love a feature that we've incorporated. We have our kind of AI assistant is called Copilot. So we integrate it into our inbox, and it actually reads every email that comes in, and it organizes them by what it determines is its priority to me. So I start from the top, and this is the most important from Copilot's perspective. What's more, if I don't like what it's done, I can actually teach it. I can say, hey, good try, Copilot, but this one is not as useful as you think, and here's why. It will remember that and use that information next time. Another thing that we see is that by using AI, people actually do less of what I'd call low value communication and coordination. I just recently had an example like this. I spoke at a conference last week in New York City. The organizer was incredibly gracious. I wanted to thank him for having me with him. And I just don't correspond with him all the time. So I didn't have his contact information. I almost reached out to my assistant to ask him, hey, can you help me out? And he would have. There's no doubt about it. But then I realized, wait a second, Copilot knows the answer to this. And I could just simply ask, hey, can you tell me John's contact information, both phone and give me his email address? Within 6 seconds, I had my answer back as it processed the information, kind of buried in all the stuff I had access to. So a great example of me not creating work for Jason, my assistant, because I didn't need to. I could find out that information on my own. So those types of little things actually add up to a lot in the average work day of a kind of knowledge worker.
Absolutely. I've been using Copilot and I find it amazingly helpful to just find things for me instead of like searching through all my Teams messages or my email inboxes. Super, super quick with that.
Great.
I understand that you work with lots of organizations and other higher eds, and one of our questions is how are you seeing AI transform the employee experience, but specifically at other universities, if you can speak to that.
I can definitely speak to it,
Right.
but it might generate some more questions, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Um, I think universities have seemed to be pretty reluctant as a whole, I would say. We get lots of feedback from students and teachers that they feel like using, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot, is cheating. It's cheating in doing their work if they're an employee. It's cheating in doing their schoolwork if they're a student. That's been so fascinating for me to see. It's kind of, we could talk more about that secular trend. I feel like you're trying to stop, the Missouri River with your arm when you say things like that. Like it's just not a winning strategy for you. You're not going to hold this thing back. We do see, however, some places where we have either professors or departments. I haven't quite feel like I've seen a whole university that's embraced AI this way, but where they embrace it, where they say, what if I take as the premise that AI is going to really change, disrupt this field of study? What would we do differently? So, as an example, out of Wharton, there's a good friend of mine named Ethan Mollick. He has decided he's going to become kind of one of the premier voices on the technical side of these models, these AI models. He's done a tremendous job, actually, of saying, I'm going to teach my students going forward as if AI were going to be the center of their experience. And he's done a really nice job with that. But I'll just say it's mixed. Right now, I just think there's a lot of fear about this technology. Again, I don't blame people. There's a lot of ignorance about the technology. I don't blame anyone for that because it's moving very fast. And that leads to just a real unevenness on how people are using it to create different experiences in higher ed.
I would also add to that, it's also very expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is, although, I don't want to have this be a plug for Microsoft. We just made a strategic decision, for instance, to take the GPT-4 model in a product that we introduced called Copilot Chat and make it entirely free. And so we're pretty excited about that. That kind of gives people access to a technology they have never had before at that price point. So I would say, yes, it has been historically really expensive. Copilot, for instance, list price is $30 per user per month. So you don't do that on a shoestring budget. But the costs are definitely coming down. And it plays, Kimberly, to this really big trend in the secular trend, which is there is so much change in the economics of this space right now. So if you feel like it's expensive today, just wait a couple of days. Like things are changing that fast.
Thank you. I'm just going to skip down. I want to kind of stay on this faculty piece for a moment.
Sure.
So, faculty autonomy is a significant concern in AI integration, as you've just alluded to. How do you envision AI enhancing the teaching process and advancing scholarly work while preserving faculty authority over curriculum and assessment? It's kind of that push-pull that we're seeing with our faculty.
Yeah, this one is, I have to admit as I answer some of these questions that I tend to be more tech forward or tech optimist than, a laggard or someone who's really concerned about.
It's your job.
Exactly. You got it. It's my job. That's my job. Um, Gosh, how do I see it? I guess I would say I'm very sympathetic to the idea that AI can be used to skip the learning process from students. I totally get that. It can be used as a shortcut, might be the easier way to say it. So I understand that. I also understand that AI can be used improperly by faculty, right here, that it can be over relied on by faculty, if you will. I guess my answer to that is I wish more organizations broadly would embrace it and boost AI literacy for people, because then you could start to understand strengths and limitations, and you could share broadly, almost in a cultural type of way, a healthy respect for the technology, and really be engaging together on what's happening. That probably is the best thing I've seen. I don't have as much experience in an academic environment as I do in a business environment, and there our best customers decide, oh, we're going to make AI literacy a part of our culture. We're going to value it, and we're going to make it a social thing so that we talk about it and share our experiences together about the good and the bad. That type of approach in business has been incredibly successful. It's very different than kind of being an ostrich and putting, your head in the sand and or just saying we're going to leave it to individuals to figure out. That feels like it just hasn't been nearly as successful at the organizational level.
That goes straight into the next question, which is what practical steps should universities take to build AI literacy and ongoing professional development for faculty, staff, and students? To what extent should it be mandatory versus elective is kind of what you're just talking about. I love the idea of the social component. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm going to stop there and let you answer.
Okay, great. Gosh, I have some ideas, but it's I'm learning just like everybody else here. I do think that training helps. Number one, we have definitely seen that some basic level of training with access helps. So if you provide access to the technology and a basic level of training, it helps at least take away the fear from people. And you have to remember that in any population, you're going to have early adopters. You're going to kind of have like mainstream adopters, and you're going to have laggards. So you have to realize that they have different mindsets and perceptions of the technology. One thing that we found, building on what you wanted to know more about, is that there is an incredible social aspect to the adoption of AI. When you put people in a cohort and you have a lead for the cohort whose job it is to help kind of improve literacy, it makes a tremendous difference. So I can imagine in the academic setting where you might decide that there would be a college approach. That, hey, we're going to take this approach and we're going to put some champions on it. We're going to help ourselves to do it and make it a very social thing. Here's what I tried today. Here's what I learned it could do today. Here's something you should try now. Like that makes all the difference out there. And then the last thing that comes to mind, at least at this moment, is, boy, it makes a difference if you'll weave it into the educational experience. And I definitely have seen this. Just Ethan happens to be a friend, and so I'm tracking what he's doing. He actually is giving assignments where he's saying, I want you to, and you must use AI here. Here are some parameters. Here's an example of how you would do it. Now, please go away and do this assignment. I expect you to use the technology. Come back and reflect, what was easier, what was harder, what were the limitations. That type of like thoughtful weaving of the technology into the task, I think is very forward looking. It puts those individuals, men and women, on the cutting edge. And I think it prepares them more for where life is, what it will look like, in the future.
And so when you talk about the kind of cohorts and learning together, like I know there's classic training, like this is how, go to LinkedIn Learning, open up the Copilot training.
Yeah.
But like the social learning, would that be something more like a promptathon, or help me out with the words there?
It can be. Yep. You can definitely do a promptathon where you are picking. That's where domains can be really useful. Again, in business, I can speak to a little bit more easily. When you have a marketing push to figure out how to use AI, you can get a leader or two of marketing and they can look at, well, what would it mean for our marketers? Let's show them how to create content with it. Let's show them how to summarize content with it. Let's show them how to create taglines with it. Let's now apply it to advertising and things like an advertising brief for a creative agency. So you get in the promptathons, you get specific to the day-to-day activities of the group. And man, it makes all the difference. It's so much better than a vanilla approach. And so again, I think you could do that. I would imagine in the philosophy department and in the biology department and in the physics department, and just have essentially prompts that demonstrate, hey, did you know these things can reason right now? A great example would be, here's a prompt could be, here's a problem, and like the problem statement I've been given on homework. Here's how I answered and it was incorrect. Will you please help me understand what I don't get? What concepts am I not understanding clearly? Something as easy as that can open people's eyes to like, wow, it's a great teacher if you use it that way. So it's that type of work. The other thing that works really well, Kimberly, I'll just say is like a simple thing, sending out like a magic prompt every day to a group. It's not even a promptathon. It's
You have
just,
my attention. A magic prompt? What is
yes.
that?
We have this great prompt that we use with Copilot. That's something. It goes something like this. You can try it with almost anything that has access to your data. In Copilot, because it has access to like all your communications, your emails and stuff, you can say something like, "Hey, do me a favor. I want you to look at all my communications and then look at Star Wars and pick what character I would be. Then take the 5 people I work with most and pick what characters they would be. Then describe a situation in which we came together to do something really interesting in terms of Star Wars." It's just a funny magic prompt. Everybody at Microsoft has run this one once, I think. And you're like, whoa, I'm Darth Vader? That's interesting. Why am I? And so it just gets people, interested in like, what is this doing? And like, if that prompt works, what other type of derivatives could I do? But these types of like magic prompts, they tend to be funny, they tend to be interesting, they tend to pique your curiosity. One of those going out a day, from some sort of lead, it really drives a difference in people's perception and skills.
Sounds fun. But I have to ask, is that in the 60% of work or the 40% of work?
Probably, unfortunately, in the 60% of work. Yes, indeed.
Okay, I'm going to move on to a serious question for us at UW here.
Right.
In your recent article, AI at Work in 2025, AI will help us navigate uncertainty. You discuss AI's role in helping organizations manage change. The UW community is currently navigating a complex period of rapid federal policy changes impacting members of our community and our public values of access and excellence in teaching, research, service, and patient care. What advice do you have for institutions dealing with both technological and regulatory uncertainty at the same time?
Yeah, I do have a thought here. It starts with 2 words: thought partner. We have seen that AI can do a lot of things. It can summarize, it can synthesize, it can create content, for instance. It can even, now we know, reason. So it actually does a good job, if you have the right models, at analytical reasoning. But one that I think is really skipped over by a lot of people, and it started to become a little bit more of a meme, if you will, in the community that follows, is thought partner. These models are actually incredibly good at being thought partners for very difficult, what you might call sticky situations. You have to spend a little bit of time to explain the context that you're operating in, but you can ask any model. It doesn't have to be Copilot, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you choose, DeepSeek, if you want to go there and have questions about that. Ask it to give you some advice or to help you think through, how should I understand what's happening? And as a thought partner, it is incredible. It's very patient. These models are tuned typically to be pretty circumspect, so they don't lean one way or the other too much. As you use any other thought partner, we would tell you don't take its advice and just go do it, but use it as a sounding board. I think you would be really surprised at how valuable it is as a thought partner. That's one of the places I found it as probably my best use is as a business thought partner. I'm thinking about the following strategic moves. Here's the context. Let's talk through this a little bit. And I'm very surprised at how it does there.
Interesting. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I work in human resources. So I'm going to go ahead and use some of this time for my people.
Great.
Um, so AI is often described as a co-pilot rather than a replacement for human workers. Can you share some examples of how organizations are successfully integrating AI while keeping employees engaged and empowered? And how might AI shift the way society might approach work in terms of work-life balance, such as lessening a 40-hour work week, or like where do you see it all moving if we're being able to work more efficiently?
Yeah, you bet. Let me put something out there you may decide to pick up on or not. There are two components to AI. There's the kind of granting superpowers to individuals part. That's the personal assistant, the co-pilot component. There is absolutely replacing human cognitive work. That is happening right now, and it will happen in the future as well. So we might come back to that second one, but your question's about the first one. I'm most familiar with my product Copilot, but to be clear for the community listening, my product is actually built on the core, what is called frontier models from OpenAI. So the same thing that ChatGPT is built on, that's what my product is built on. We find in really, very scientific studies that we've been able to do, both lab-based and what we call field-based, with companies actually out in the wild in their work environments, that an average user of Copilot can easily save 20 hours a month. We find that good users of Copilot can save 30 hours a month. And we find excellent users of Copilot that can save 40 or more hours per month on their job. At the individual level, we find two things. People generally feel Copilot is giving them kind of superpowers, it's kind of almost like having an exoskeleton if you worked in a factory, power beyond what you have naturally, certainly commanded by you, controlled by you, never working on its own, but real power to do things you couldn't otherwise do. Simple example of that. I love to not attend meetings. Copilot is fantastic because you can query meetings that have happened that you haven't been at. And for an hour-long meeting where they talk for 10 minutes about a subject you cared about, you can say, give me the full synopsis of this particular subject and tell me what was decided. Who was the most vocal? And what do you think I need to do next if I care? It's an incredible answer, that comes back. So I'll just start there by saying when it comes to workers enjoying the benefits on the individual level, it's pretty incredible. But there is, Kimberly, an interesting thing happening right now where there's tension between the employee and the employer. And the reason that's true is when I can save an individual 20 or 30 hours, they're not excited about giving all that back to the company. They kind of have this feeling of like, I should get to pocket some of that for myself personally. I'd like to get off a little bit earlier, or perhaps go to my child's basketball game that I otherwise were going to miss. And that's some tension that has developed over the last 2 years. People who ran companies expected these results because they could see them. They ran these studies with us to translate directly to the bottom line. And at the individual level, they don't, which is interesting because there is an individual decision about what to do with the time.
From an employer value proposition, though, like if you only have to work on work that's meaningful to you, that should hopefully help balance up that. But you should absolutely go to your kid's basketball game if you can.
Indeed. Most important thing.
As AI continues to evolve, how is it currently enhancing workplace accessibility for employees with disabilities?
This is a place. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
but yeah,
We've
I'm
got some
also interested in
excitement
the
here.
future possibilities you might see.
Oh, we've got some real excitement here. At Microsoft, one of our mantras has been as we work and focus on things that situations that come to us often because of people with disabilities. It actually benefits not only those with disabilities, but it benefits very broadly society. So we're really excited about what Copilot can do as an assistant to help those who have disabilities in many ways. I'll give a couple of examples and then we'll tell you what's coming. Sometimes it's hard if you have a physical disability, for instance, to read data that's coming to you that's long prose. You might have, for instance, eyesight problems or something like that. Copilot can do such a nice job of summarizing the gist of long text, giving you a sense for what's there, and then going deeper and deeper as you work with it. Other times it might be difficult for you to draft something in response. So in a communication type of way, it can actually take what was written to you and then take your input, almost like an assistant would take an input, and draft a great response for you to send back. That gets amplified even further with what we call multimodal approaches to AI. And that just is a fancy way of saying you can talk to it. and it can hear you and react to you. And you can show it things, both images and videos, and it can react to them as well. In many ways, we want the world and people's voice inputs to become the prompts going forward rather than having to type. And that opens, worlds and worlds of possibilities for us. Just on the PC itself, as we integrate this into Windows, being able to talk to your Windows PC and have it do what you want it to. Please minimize this window. Please open this one up. Please summarize that email. Write a response back to Kimberly. Tell her that I was so thrilled to be on the show and that it was a lot of fun. Those types of things really start to happen with the power of speech. That doesn't hit every disability, but they're almost every multimodal access point for us allows us to do that type of exciting work. So we're very excited about what this can do. And again, I think it'll benefit all of us.
Absolutely. Sounds super exciting. Okay, at the University of Washington, we are fortunate to have a robust HR community of practice comprised of about 700 dedicated HR practitioners who support a diverse workforce. As AI continues to transform the landscape of human resources, what advice can you offer them in preparing their departments and teams for this technological evolution?
Let me think about this one for a second. The thing that comes to mind for me, again, just reflecting on my experience and what I've observed over the last 2 years, interestingly, that this technology is as much about culture as it is about innovation. I am finding that organizations that decide that their culture is going to be forward-leaning and is going to embrace, what this can and will do to the future and participate in shaping what it can and will do to the future. Boy, they are being very successful right now because they've decided it's a cultural change. At Microsoft, just to make it very real for a moment, when our current CEO, who's been CEO for about 11 years or so, when he came on, the biggest change he made, he didn't fire all of us. I was there at the time. He didn't fire all of us and say, hey, I'm going to start from scratch and build up a great company. He came in and said, I'd actually like to teach you about the growth mindset. I'd like to teach you how to learn. I'd like to teach you how to be curious. I'd like to teach you how to have enough humility that you can say, I don't know, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna learn by doing. That cultural shift for us was more impactful for our organization than any innovation ever could have been. It was much more impactful than even if we could have caught that mobile wave I talked about a few minutes ago. It made all the difference. So with the same people doing the same jobs, but with a different mindset, he has entirely transformed, not only who we are, but financially, how much we're worth and what we're doing for the world. And in many ways, for your HR friends, I would say that same thing. Like, this is very much a cultural opportunity and challenge. It is tech, but it's going to be more about that culture. And I would really encourage them to think of themselves as cultural leaders. I work with HR for my businesses here, and I try to lean on my HR partners to drive cultural change. That's one of the most important levers I have, for actually getting to business success for us.
Yeah, I love that this AI conversation keeps coming back to the people.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? It really is about the people. I mean, the thing sits there and doesn't do much without us. That's the reality of it all.
We have a few audience questions picking up on some of the questions we just talked about. One is, can you offer examples of successfully using AI as a collaborative thought partner in the workplace?
Absolutely. I will do this mostly from my own experience, just really quickly, they're the freshest. Gosh, on my team, there are a number of different places that I need a thought partner, and I'll list them out. When it comes to actually constructing the product, we are inventing the future, and we use it all the time. I use it all the time to think through what the product could and should do. And to make it very real, Kimberly, I'll pick what we were just talking about. How could we use AI to more effectively serve those with disabilities? Man, that would be a fantastic jam session with Copilot or ChatGPT. You would be really surprised at what it would do there. So in terms of product innovation, it's something we absolutely use. I have a marketing component to the business, and we do lots of marketing. So we use it for creative briefs. We use it, for instance, for naming. It actually really changes the game for naming. We used to have to send things out to agencies for a week or two to get really creative naming results back, and it does a fantastic job if you give it.
Because now you just call everything Copilot.
Well, that is a criticism I'll take. That is a criticism I'll take for sure. See how well it did? It told me I just called it Copilot. I was going to love it. But naming is a place that is really good. Another place that we use it as a thought partner is in business strategy and business model. So as we model things out, I use it in places like that. We use it in game theory. So you can, game theory is something that business people do all the time, but they most of the time do it with themselves or small groups. That's really helpful to describe a setup and say, let us game these moves out between us and our competition, what will happen. So any of those areas, it's a pretty excellent thought partner.
I'm going to go ahead and share a personal example of a way I used it to thought partner recently. I have a son who's a junior in high school. He is not going to be going to UW. He's not that kid. He's artsy and wants to go to film school, and he's into a lot of, and he's only ever been at smaller schools. But he wants to stay in LA or maybe New York or randomly Colorado. And so like I started to work with ChatGPT on like, help me understand, here's the profile of my kid. Here's what he wants to do. What schools might be a good fit for him? And it was an amazing like hour that I spent with it, really learning about schools that I'm not that familiar with that might be a good fit for him.
Awesome. What a great example. And what I love about that, I mean, I'll tell you again, just picking up on what I found is because people are worried about hallucination and did it take you down the rabbit hole and was it right? What I find is when you use this as a thought partner, it kind of, as long as you have the right state of mind, it kind of doesn't matter because it's opening your mind to things. You'll go do your own homework. You're like, let me just check and make sure that school is like that. But like you say, just the opening of the aperture, and so often in these domains that we're working, it's tough. It's like it's really tough. So it's amazing to me that we have machines. What you just described, and this is why I get so excited, is a machine that literally helped you to be creative and organize your thoughts and see things you wouldn't otherwise see. That's an amazing invention in and of itself. Like, wow.
Yeah, and won't replace his college
Yeah,
counselor at school, but will help
exactly.
us go into the conversations having some of our own ideas.
Exactly right. Yep.
Okay, I have a question that's been asked a couple times now in the chat. So let me read it to you. What kinds of AI training are available to employees in the broader community? Are there programs you could recommend for higher education?
Great question. LinkedIn has some great stuff. So, full disclaimer, Microsoft owns LinkedIn. So, but there's a lot of really great stuff on LinkedIn. I'm speaking to a community I think that knows that you can learn anything on YouTube. So it turns out if you go to YouTube and ask, questions about how you use Copilot or ChatGPT, there's quite a bit out there today. Microsoft produces some courses. So if you go to, it must be like learn.microsoft.com. There are some things there, but there are just many ways to learn about it. It's moving so fast that I would say that things like LinkedIn and YouTube are probably more robust sources of information right now because they're being updated more quickly than some of these more formal learning paths, but the formal learning paths are good too. Experimentation is fantastic. Not everyone is excited about that though. So I understand that.
One of the places where when I started, I listened to a lot of podcasts and it helped me connect with experts in more real time.
Yeah.
Um, so we can loop back to that later when we ask people where to find you. Okay, I'm going to switch gears to something that is not as fun for me, but important.
Okay.
Ethics, bias, and AI governance.
Mhm.
AI can amplify biases if not carefully managed. How is Microsoft approaching AI ethics, and what should institutions like UW be doing to ensure AI is used responsibly?
Oh, great questions. I mean, I think we're all concerned about this. Just to start with the basics. These models are statistical models that are created by training on lots and lots of data. The data for large language models is essentially human writing. And so humans are we are who we are. We write from our own perspective and biases and the angles that we see things from. So it's just important to give a little bit of context to the question. I think it's an excellent one. If I make it really clear for just a moment, there's a model out of China. You've heard about it in the news if you're tracking. It's called DeepSeek, that looks and sounds a lot like many of the other models, like ChatGPT, until you ask it about the Tiananmen Square incident in China, in which moment it turns out to answer very, very different from any other model out there because it has been modified to answer that in a particular way that suits the politics of the Chinese government right now. It's just a very explicit example of the types of things that can happen. So we at Microsoft, we are trying to be transparent about how you can assess a model's biases in terms of how it answers questions. We have a number of tools out there that I don't have off the tip of my tongue, but that we provide so that people can actually test the various models on specific questions and answers to get a sense for the biases that are contained within simply, the statistical weighting of what the model consists of. And we're just doing our best to help people recognize that these are created by people and they do reflect some of the perspectives of people. And it's best to evaluate them if you can using these types of tools. But Kimberly, I'll say we're not all experts. We don't all have the time to do that. And so it's a very real question. I think it's an excellent question. We don't have super definitive answers to it. Microsoft, our perspective is when it comes to these types of things, government regulation is very useful. That's why we have governments, and that's why we elect governments in democratic nations. But that also won't be perfect in any way. It does allow me to say one other thing that we may pick up on later. We may not, but I'll just put it out there. If you ask me what I was concerned about, I get very concerned. I talked about AI as a thought partner. I get very concerned about AI as an emotional partner. I think that's one of the most dangerous things that can happen is to have AI be an emotional partner for you, because if you find yourself in a case where you are depending on a machine to essentially impact your emotions, you can be easily manipulated and easily deceived. And that's very scary for me. I'm a father of four. I'm a grandparent. I have my first little granddaughter right now. Like that's definitely,
Congrats.
thank you so much. But that's definitely top of mind for me right now. So you may pick that up, you may not, but it is.
Yeah, no, we're totally picking that up. So I believe that there's companies out there who kind of have that model who are offering, very low cost or free therapy.
Indeed. Yeah.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, I'm very concerned because I think that emotions are very human things. This is a place where I'm not tech forward. I really, my personal opinion, not the opinion of Microsoft. I don't know if Microsoft has an opinion on this, but my personal opinion is we need to be very careful about these tools when it comes to deception and when it comes to manipulation. Super, super careful. And we have to recognize that over the course of the last roughly decade, we have allowed right in front of our faces social media to manipulate us and our children in a really significant way. That's been proven very clearly through scientific studies. I would say that if we have been worried about that, this is much more dangerous than anything that's happened on social media, because you can truly forget that you are talking to a machine. Like that's the whole idea behind these models, is that they approximate human speech so well you can't tell. And that's very concerning for sure, because then, as you gain an emotional attachment, you place a different weight on the information coming to you for sure. Exactly. So it's something that's definitely, again, as a father and a grandfather, it's definitely top of mind for me.
So earlier we touched on, but I didn't pick up the thread of AI replacing certain types of work.
Yeah.
Sounds like therapists are safe.
Well, I would say they're safe if Jared rules the world, but I'll tell you what, Jared does not rule the world. I think people will absolutely offer those types of services, no doubt about it.
What I wanted to pick back up on is what areas do you think, yeah, that might go away?
Um, well, let me answer in generalities and then I can get specific for a moment. Up to this point in the world economy at large, whenever you needed ambiguous but logical or analytical problem solving, you needed a human, and you hired those humans on a one person quantum basis. In a business world, we call it an FTE. You know that because you're in HR, a full-time employee. What we're essentially doing at the broad macro level is we now have rational reasoning. In the industry, we would call it reasoning that that is as good as, or in some cases better than, a person to take a really kind of abstract set of inputs and solve a problem and get to an answer or an outcome. And that's being proven very, very rigorously right now. So what that means is economically, I can now sell you kind of thinking power, reasoning power, not on a per person, per employee basis, but instead on some other basis, a per minute basis perhaps, or a per problem solved basis. But importantly, if we were economists, we'd say, wow, when you change the unit of measure, the quantity at which I can dispense it and sell it to you, you do something really significant. And so with that understanding, I would just simply say lots of jobs, I think, are going to be impacted and changed. We have computer scientists that are thinkers. We have accountants that are thinkers. We have lawyers that are thinkers. We have, there are all sorts of people who in the knowledge economy solve problems from very ambiguous, inputs where they get to. All of those things, I think, will be affected. Now, do I think that will mean that these poor people will now, you'll find all your accountant friends and lawyers on the street begging for food? Not at all. What we've actually seen is when this happens, when innovations start to replace human labor, whether it's thought labor or physical labor, the economy actually creates more opportunities. That's been proven now since the Industrial Revolution. So we feel really good about the general positioning that like this is going to create lots of opportunities. But when it comes to thinking, jobs where thinking or reasoning is important, we think that they'll all be affected, might be the word that I would use, in really significant ways.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions from our audience. So let's see if we can get through these before we wrap up.
Great.
AI advancements generate both excitement and fear. How should a university like UW be transparent and communicative in its AI adoption so the community remains informed and confident in the university's direction and decision making?
Well, man, I couldn't have set this one up better if I would have eat it up. I think what I have seen be most successful is for an organization, because remember, this is a cultural, I continue to think this is a cultural change as much as it's a technological change. I think it's fantastic to take a step back as a community and to create principles that you share out on how you will use, talk about, and disclose your use of the technology. So for instance, I know companies that say, here's a principle about how we will use AI. Here's the next principle about whenever we do use AI, we will mark it as such. We will say this content is AI generated or AI was used to produce this product. There are other things where it says, here are the places we will not use AI. We don't believe AI should be used in these places. So I think creating a set of principles that you can stick to, that you can have integrity with, is a great step forward. It really helps people understand. One of the big questions out there is videos are getting so easy to create and deep fakes are getting so easy to create. Many institutions have questions about, well, will you ever take Kimberly and create an AI avatar of her? And if so, will you tell me that it's not her, but it's her avatar? Principles like that I think are really important. Many organizations are getting there. They're saying, we will never take our top leaders and create an AI avatar and use them unless we market. And the reason we say unless we market is it can be very useful for things like training videos or communication videos, et cetera. So there are valuable uses of these things, but it spurs a conversation that is incredibly, I think it's eye-opening, it's valuable, it gets to a really nice place.
At the University of Washington, I could see that taking a very long time. We have lots of our own thought leaders. Have you seen universities do it at a global scale?
No, no, but I've seen businesses do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, businesses do it because they don't have the same approach to the culture, if you will. There's much more top-down decision making, and there's clarity on who gets to make what decisions, often with input, but not necessarily by vote or committee or democracy.
What about healthcare settings?
In healthcare settings, I haven't seen anything that's different than university settings. The one thing I'll say in the healthcare setting is the essence of the technology in terms of identifying patterns has proven to be incredibly valuable in things like diagnosis, and even proving to diagnose certain things better than humans do. And so what many of those settings are starting to do is to continue to keep the humans there, but essentially have a double check with an AI, an AI assistant that can offer a second opinion immediately for someone. So, there are different scenarios in healthcare than there are for like education and business, but
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, next question. Second to last. What can be done about the environmental impact of using AI for basic daily tasks that are currently handled by humans? When will we see net environmental benefits from AI, such as improvements in green energy research being accelerated by AI?
It's a great question. I think there are two aspects to it. Number one is, can we reduce the impact of these large data centers on the environment today? The biggest single impact comes from energy and how the electricity is created. And for that reason, at Microsoft, we tried really hard to state our principles and live according to them to essentially get to the cleanest position that we can get to. So, for instance, we back nuclear energy. That could or could not be something that is controversial with the group, but we think that that's a cleaner way to get to than certainly burning fossil fuels. That's one thing, is how the energy is produced to be consumed by the data centers. The second part of the question I think that's really good is, when could we use AI to actually create innovations that would help us with our quest to just do a better job of our stewardship of the planet? I think that's happening already today. I don't know of any really big breakthroughs right at this moment that have been AI driven, but I know of one in particular that we've been excited about with, for instance, batteries, where we were able to design, working together with partners, a new type of battery just based on using AI and pattern recognition. And we've been really excited about that. So there's a lot of good stuff that you can do. We've been talking a lot about it as a language model, but the underlying fundamental technology here, we won't get too deep, but is really about pattern recognition in a way that humans have struggled to do and computers have not been able to do historically. So, for instance, in medicine or in things like manufacturing, we're starting to see people come up with novel medicines and novel compounds where AI has taken the basic pattern for really valuable compounds or really valuable medicines and applied them into a new domain. And that's really exciting for us. Like, we think that there's all sorts of really good applications in the future.
Very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last audience question. Can you talk about recent advances in AI technology that reduces hallucinations, bias, and other risks? For example, reasoning models and achieving consensus across different models on a topic that seem to make a difference.
Yeah, that's great. Really good question. I'll name a couple that are out there right now. One is just the simple approach that we call grounding. This means that you're not just depending on the model, but you actually feed the model data associated with the question that you're asking. So I'll give a very simple example. If you asked the first version of ChatGPT, what's the temperature outside? It had no connection to the outside world. And in the very beginning, it would totally hallucinate. It's 78 degrees and very balmy, It just had no idea. As it got smarter and smarter, one of the things we did is ground it in the internet and teach it when certain questions came in about weather, it could actually query weather services to get the information. And then what we instructed it to do essentially was, please do not hallucinate, go find the information and then give it back to the user. So that simple process of grounding is something you can do. The asker of the question alluded to another one, which is to have a set of these agents that essentially all ask the question, and then they come up with either a consensus or they come up with their kind of opposing views, and they present both of those. Hey, it looks like you asked about a very complex political topic. Let us give you both sides. So today, if you go use ChatGPT and ask about something happening in the Middle East, as a simple example, or politics in the United States, most models like ChatGPT will try to offer you not a definitive answer, but a comprehensive answer. Let us give you both sides here. And that's, those techniques are kind of what we've been working on more than anything else. Incidentally, we also use them to check reasoning. So that's another thing we can do is ask it to solve a problem, but ask it also to check its work. You know, solve this problem and then come back through and see if that seems reasonable given what you're trying to solve there. So there's a lot, and you can do that with separate agents, you know, separate tools, or with the same tool working on itself.
That's great. Jared, is there anything as the university in Redmond's backyard that we haven't asked you that you think we should?
Actually, that's a good question. You know what you didn't necessarily ask me is like, what's my advice for the group? So
Yeah,
I
let's
do
hear
have
it.
I do have some advice for the group. Again, I recognize that like any community, there are people have different feelings toward this, and there are early adopters. There's kind of people who are mainstream adopters and people who are laggards. But I would advise the following: the more curious you are about this technology, the more willing you are to try it out, not once or twice, but to learn about what it can do and what its limitations are, the more you recognize that this will be probably the single biggest driver of change over the coming 2 decades, the better your life will be. And I mean that in every domain, because you won't operate off of fear or what someone else is telling you about it, but you will be able to gain your own experience and be able to form your own judgments. And you'll also be able to determine what course of action you should take, whether you're an educator, an HR professional, someone who is a student right now worried about their future career. I just would really recommend be curious, you know, be incredibly curious about these tools and recognize that there is a very good chance that this, going back to what we said, secular trend, is going to be the trend that defines the biggest change in our lifetimes over this next kind of 10 to 20 year period. That's really important. It's probably the best advice I could give to the community right now.
Jared, thank you so much. This has been such an insightful conversation. You've given us so much to think about, and we're just super grateful for your time.
My pleasure.
If folks are interested in learning more about you and Microsoft AI at work, where should they find you?
Our work you can find at microsoft.com/worklab. That's a fantastic place to see where the work is. And then if you go to my profile on LinkedIn, I have a newsletter there and you can learn more about what we're doing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Before we close, I want to encourage everyone here to continue engaging in these discussions. AI isn't just something that's happening to us, it's something we have the power to shape, as you've just heard. I hope you'll join us for our next event at the AI Speaker Series, which is Tuesday, March 11th. Matt Hall, NVIDIA's Vice President of Global AI Solutions, will be in conversation with Professor Emer Dooley of the UW Foster School of Business and its Creative Destruction Lab. You can visit the UW events calendar to register. Thank you all for being here. And again, thank you, Jared.
my pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.